Welcome back, everybody, to the afternoon session of the Dream Summit. Again, we're focusing on dreaming together for a better future. I'm excited to be back. Thank you all for joining the morning session that I had the opportunity to do the roundtable with. Definitely was an honor. But I'm here just to do an introduction to an old friend, old colleague. Good to see him in his virtual space. Kevin Colbert, who will be joining us to have a great discussion. So before I kick it over to Kevin, let me just read a little bit about Kevin. So he's an educator. Kevin works with students and staff to create environments conducive for learning. It is his goal to amplify their communication, connection, and confidence so they can make an influential impact on the world. He mentors with a passion, guiding his students to effectively strengthen and elevate their voice both in and out of the classroom. With over 10 years of teaching experience, a keen sense for making meaningful connection with audience, and an aptitude for helping others maximize their potential, Kevin enjoys the opportunity to engage with audience and connect with individuals invested in education. He's a graduate of Pike High School. Shout out, yep. Alma mater as well, where he currently is also a teacher and teaches world geography. He holds a BA in history and a master's degree in education, both from Indiana University. I have a lot of colleagues who are big Hoosier fans. Actually just watched the IU girls team pull out a squeaker against Purdue last night, which was a good game. And while he's not teaching or mentoring, he can be found reading comic books, creating delicious meals with his wife, Stephanie, and binge watching Netflix, which we all do, with his jalapeno the house cat. So again, Kevin, man, excited for you to be here. And the floor is yours. Everybody, I hope you enjoyed this session, and I'll see you guys afterwards.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, David. I appreciate that. Well, welcome you all. I'm actually in my classroom right now, speaking of teaching. The work is always going on and is always in a constant flow. So I'm here in my office, which actually brings me to, like, when I was asked to do this, one of the first things that I thought of was my students. Like, what could I give you all that I kind of get from my students, especially on this day of service? And so I was thinking of my students, and some funny stories just came up in my mind, and some sobering stories came up. But one that I was really thinking about were the people in my classroom, the students that do the dreaming and do the work. And I kind of wanted to take those two pieces about dreaming and working, like practical working, and bring them together. Because I know that is a very, very valuable tool to have, those two things. We need to be able to dream, and we need to be able to actually do practical work, to put in the work. Excuse me. So I started thinking about my students, and oftentimes, as many of you may know, for my educators and future educators out there, I do a lot of observing, and it's important that when you're observing in the classroom that you kind of are mindful of, all the students. And so there's a couple students over the years that come to mind, won't mention any names, but when I pick out my dreamers, those are the folks that kind of off the bat share with me their stories, which I was actually sharing with David and Leland. One of the first things I do in my class is I have students write to me a story kind of about themselves. So I've been going through those stories recently for this new semester, and I've had a lot of dreamers, and I always do, and that's a beautiful thing, and it's a great thing. But one thing that often pops up with my students, and I do teach freshmen, is that there's a really, really big dream, and then oftentimes there might be a disconnect, like with the work that needs to be done. Like, so for example, it came up again this year, but I remember a couple years ago it was a thing. Like, it was really hot. All the students wanted to be pediatricians. I'm not sure why. Like, I don't know if it was a TV show or, some rapper might have mentioned Peter, but everybody wanted to be a pediatrician for like 3 or 4 years. And I remember this one student in particular. It was actually during a college visit. Like, a college came here and was talking to the students, and this particular student in my class didn't have the greatest of grades, which, it happens in high school. But I remember this student was really gung-ho about being a pediatrician. And one of the things that the speaker asked was, well, okay, well, what kind of grades do you have in math and science. And the student replied, I got a D and an F. They're not good. So between myself and the speaker, we kind of had a little talk about, hey, pediatrician, go for it. Like, that's your dream. That's your goal. You should go for that. However, you need to think about the actual tangible work that you need to do right now to make that happen. And within that student's life, within all of my students' lives, and even within our lives, like, there's a lot of tangible work that we need to think about and not get disconnected from in order to reach our goals, in order to reach our dreams. But the dream is important. Like, oftentimes things can start with a dream. On the flip side, I have my worker bees. I have students that, often are putting in the work and they're grinding, but they're not really thinking about what it is they want to do, or even what's coming down the pike, like next week, next month. And true to form, some of the papers that I got this semester were illustrative of that. I had students that were very detail oriented, which is great. I'm all about that life. But when I ask them, hey, well, what are you thinking about, doing when you get out of here? Or even before I even get to the leaving high school part, like, we're scheduling classes here this week. Hey, what classes are you thinking about taking? I don't know. I don't really know what I like. And like I said, the work is great, but thinking about your goals and your dreams and kind of pushing what you like into that dream and goal is just as important. So you got to have the dreams, and you got to have like the actual practical, tangible work. You got to have them both. And when I was asked to speak to that, when I thought about that, I started kind of putting myself in the mindset, hey, well, one of the methods in which I try to reach my students is I always try to put myself back in their shoes. Like, not literally in their shoes, but, once upon a time, long ago in a galaxy far away, I was in high school. I was actually in this high school. And so I often try to put myself back into that mindset. Like, okay, what was Kevin thinking about during his teenage years or my formative years? I try to put myself in that place, and not always, but oftentimes that's able to help me reach my students. So I did that exercise for myself. And so I started thinking about, when it comes to me, like my dreams and the actual tangible work, like, how did that stuff come to be in me? And I then immediately thought about the people that kind of shaped me and made me. And obviously the first people from my mind were my parents. And the older I get, the more I actually, I appreciate even more. And I guess I don't want to use the word lucky, fortunate, blessed, whatever word you want to use, how amazing my parents were. Like, I'm very, very thankful for that. Like, I had parents that not only instilled in me the importance of dreaming, like not putting any limits on my mind, but also instilling in me the actual value of hard work, like putting limits on my body. Like, for example, like, hey, like, you all can play whatever games you want, hide and go seek, whatever you want outside. But when the street light comes on, tangibly, practically get your tail back in this house. So I had a lot of those lessons. And so I wanted to share a few of those with you from not just my childhood, but one from my college days. Like, because those are the kind of things, I think, I'm not going to speak for all of us, but I know for many people, like, in those formative years, kind of cementing that stuff is what kind of shapes us into our adult years. And we always want to continue to grow, but part of the reason I teach high school is because this is the age where this is the last bastion of being molded, in the easiest state. You can always change, you can always grow, but as many of you all know, it's always, I wish I could go back to. So I try to get them now, and that's why I thought about myself then. In my childhood, I had a healthy dose of dreaming and like lessons from my parents and from the people that loved me and cared about me, my community, my church, different organizations I was involved in. But one that comes to mind about shaping my dreams was just the fact that my mother, and I have a twin brother, my mother used to read to us like every night. I think through like first grade. I feel like I was 6, maybe going on 7 when when that ended. And I remember I was like, why does that got to stop? But I just remember how important it was, because that gave me at a very young age, not just the, not just the reading is important. All right. We know that. But that's not what I was thinking of. What I was thinking of when my mother would always read to me was, wow, this is kind of like an escape hatch. Like this is not only relaxing, but this is making me think about things that I wouldn't normally think about, whether it was a fiction or a nonfiction story. Like I was always amazed how you could get, motivated from a story. I'll be honest, I think that's part of the reason that I actually teach today. And so as a child, my brother and I, from an early age, we kind of had that planted in us, like the ability to think and the ability to dream. And I think that is equally as important as actually doing tangible work, which also, when I was a child, my mom, like my mom was notorious for this. And in the neighborhood we grew up in, like it was kind of known, hey, my brother's name is Kyle, and we're twins. So it's like, hey, Kevin and Kyle might get, they might get snatched from playtime during the day, because my mom was notorious for making us like do book reports in the summertime, which I tell that story to some people and they're like, what? But the older I've gotten, I've realized that wasn't just going on in the Colbert household. But not even just in the summertime. The number one rule in my house, and some of you all may be able to attest to this, we couldn't go outside and play until we were finished with our homework. And so even though I didn't want to do the homework, homework is like boring. I don't want to do the homework. But I knew the only way I'm going to be able to get what I want, the only way I'm going to be able to get to dream and play with my friends, is I got to do this work. And translating that into like adulthood, that speaks volumes. And I know it's, everybody's different. I get that. But there's something tangibly pleasing to me about getting your work done before you play. Like, I don't know if it's a relief or what, but there's value in that. Like I push that on my students, even if that's not their cup of tea at their own house. Like I'm like, hey, look, play later, work now. Or as they say, work harder, play harder. And I think that goes hand in hand with the reading. Like I never want to get detached from reading, even though I teach social studies. A huge part of my class is reading. So just like I was mentioning about my mother reading to students, like, even though this isn't like a kindergarten class, I think it's important like to read to your students. So it's not just me telling them stories. I do that. I like to tell stories, but I read to my students a lot. I just think that's important. So those two pieces from my childhood were kind of like the dream shaping and the tangible work. Those are just two lessons. I could go on. But those are just two things that I try to impart on my students, and I want something, you all to take something from that, because that is definitely part of what shaped me from my childhood now, for my dreaming and being able to make those dreams come true. From my college days, so many. I think just like my formative years, I had a healthy dose of dreams and lessons, okay, in college. And one of them, and for all you that, that have gone to college, or if you're on your way to college, I feel like college for me was like the first time I was kind of out of the bubble of comfort. Like up until that point, I had been, surrounded by family, surrounded by my kind of same circle of friends. But when I went to college, it's like the first time you're kind of out of that. They're always kind of with you and you carry them with you. But it's the first time I was out of that. And I remember that feeling. It's a little scary, but it's also like this very, 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 I don't know, there's comfort in the fear, I guess. And having that kind of allowed me to push myself and to dream big, like to step out of my comfort zone and to do things that I had never done before. Not that I had never done that in my life. I had, but it was exponential. And so I'm always kind of chasing that, like that feeling I had when I first stepped on campus at IU. Like it was the first time in my life I felt like, hey, you have the whole world in front of you. And I'm always trying to impart that on my students. And I feel like as a grown person now, as adults, the older we get, sometimes we lose that. Like we lose the feeling or the belief that you got the whole world in front of you. And we kind of stop chasing that. And I don't think we should ever stop chasing that feeling, the ability to dream big and to know that, hey, there are no limits on what I can do. Like, because it is easy. It's very easy for us in our society to kind of put limits on ourselves. I'm not saying that's bad, but when you want to keep your mind wide open. And that's kind of what college bestowed on me. It wasn't out of the blue. I got that from my formative years, but when I stepped on campus, I felt that for the first time. And a healthy dose of practical work, tangible work, as David can attest to. I'm a member of Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity, and I pledged at IU, and many wonderful lessons, met many wonderful brothers, and did lots of good work. But one of the things that I always remember, like that I kind of hold on to tangibly, that I think is very practical, and I think we all need to get back to it, is I had a reminding or a refocusing or an intense, like a very, very intense experience in being responsible or being accountable for others, like thinking as a whole, thinking as one, thinking about someone other than yourself. And I don't want to say I know. I feel like we've gotten away from that. It's even a struggle here as a teacher in school to kind of get my students, hey, it's not, you're important, like you're special, but it's not just about you. Like, I can't think of a more appropriate time during this pandemic to kind of echo that. Like, it's not just about me. It's not just about you. It's about us. And some of the teachings and lessons that I got during my years pledging, or years, during my time pledging in Alpha Phi Alpha, it intensified that. And I think as grown folks, as older, as you get older, I think that's something that we need to get back to. I'm not saying, abandon all ye hope of your individualism. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, I think we need, as a society, to think about the us, the we more, especially in a world where, rugged individualism is valued. Like, I get that. I know that story. But it is important to kind of always get back to and remember that we are one. Like, we're a group, we're a tribe, we're together in this. And so that was something that got re-intensified when I was in college. And so thinking about those lessons of dreaming, those lessons of practical work, tangible work, those things shaped me. And I'm actually living my dream right now. I'm in my classroom. I'm like here at Pike High School, my alma mater, where I graduated from, and I'm teaching like my favorite subject, social studies. I'm teaching world geography. Like I'm actually living my dream. When I was in college, and this is part of the reason I put this in my blurb, like I changed my major like 3 or 4 times. And it's not because I was indecisive. I was looking for my dream, and I really couldn't put my finger on it. I had help from counselors. I had help from mentors. I had help from professors. But at no point during that search, that journey, like me pursuing my dream, was I ever frightened? Was I ever scared? Was I ever worried? And it's not because I'm special. It's because I leaned on those lessons that I had, like those teachings. And I was always, I don't want to say sure of myself, but just confident in the fact that, hey, if I just lean on the practical stuff that has gotten me to this point in my life, whether it be college or whatever, like, then I'm allowed to dream big. Like I'm going to free my mind, but I can protect my body. I can lean on those lessons. And I think that's how I ended up finding my major, finding the ability to speak those stories through history. It's how I got into grad school. It's how I found this career in this classroom and teaching. It's how I actually ended up here speaking to you all. Like, live like for the dream, but lean on those lessons. And I think that is something that is very appropriate today as we celebrate the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King and all those men and women that were part of the movement. Like, they were dreamers. Like, this is the Dream Summit. They were big dreamers, but they put in the tangible and practical work, and that just didn't come out of anywhere. It came from, lessons they had throughout their life and their formative years. And I think, we learn things in school and we're learning things now, but it's also important to kind of reach back and remember those tangible lessons that you got, even if you've never put a finger on it before. Like, we've all had training in that. We've all had training in dreaming, and we've had training in the tangible tools that you will need to reach those dreams. So I just want to say thank you all for allowing me to speak to you all. I love, sharing these stories as much as I can. And so with that, I'll go ahead and close up. And yeah.
Hey, Kevin, I appreciate that, man. Enjoy that. Listen, I can attest to a couple things, mainly the upbringing and, your mom, parents reading to you, but also you don't get to have any fun until the work gets done, right?
Yep.
So even when I got my license in high school, the first thing my parents asked me is, all your homework done? You got everything you need before I could go out and joyride. They always made sure.
Yeah.
And I carried those lessons when I went to college, right? Being away from home, attending school 2 hours away. I always remind myself, before I go to this party, is all my homework done and things like that.
It's like a voice in the back of your head.
Absolutely. And it was definitely those lessons. And then finally, I can definitely attest to just the experiences of a teacher and taking everything that I learned growing up, that I learned in college, that we learned through our fraternity, right?
Yes.
To make sure that I do those things as an educator myself. So definitely enjoyed it. And I thank you guys for tuning in. And again, this has been the Dream Summit. Thank you, Kevin Colbert, for sharing and inspiring us. Remember, as we celebrate Dr. King today, we don't just celebrate Dr. King today, but we celebrate him every single day and his works, and making sure that we continue to have his legacy live on 365 days a year. So take care, everybody. Enjoy the rest of the summit.
Absolutely.